So my name is Ha Vinh Tho, but my first name is Tho, and I'm the program director of the Gross National Happiness Center in Bhutan.
Okay, so I've heard you say that happiness is a skill that can be taught. Can you explain what you mean by this?
Yes, there's a very interesting sort of coming together now of traditional contemplative wisdom with the latest research in science, especially neuroscience. And a lot of scientific evidence is pointing out to the fact that qualities like compassion, pro-social behavior, altruism, generosity, gratitude are actually innate qualities in a human being. And we know from research that these are very important components of happiness. But as all innate capabilities, they have to be trained. Like we all have the innate capability to learn how to speak, but we have to learn how to speak. So it's at the same time an innate capability, but it needs to be developed, trained, educated. And happiness is very much the same. It's sort of an innate capability of the human being to develop, as a happy person, to develop happiness. And yet it has to be trained. And what we see from both observation and research is that, of course, happiness comes as a result, so to say, or as a balance between outer and inner circumstances. Yes, so the objective circumstances we're in and the way we respond to it inwardly. But all the research points out at the fact that the inner side, so what we develop in our own mind, has actually a stronger impact than the outer circumstances. As soon as we go out of really very, either dangerous or really exceptional circumstances, right? But in like ordinary life, for most of us, the inner factor plays a bigger role than the outer factors, and this inner factor can be trained.
How would you go about embedding that in a country, in policy? How do you get that message out there?
Well, I think at the policy level, we are more looking at the well-being factor. And well-being has to do with creating enabling conditions, conducive and creating a conducive environment so that people can flourish and thrive and have the best possible life. So I think at policy level, it is the responsibility of the government to make its best to create this conducive environment, keeping in mind that the goal of development is the well-being of the people, rather than just economic growth, for instance, which is what most modern governments are somehow looking at in a very one-sided way. And also from research, we know that for instance, income or living standard is one of the factors of well-being, absolutely, no doubt. But it's only one of the factors of well-being and has to be integrated in a much broader vision. So on one hand, governments have the possibility, the ability to create enabling conditions if they have this holistic approach to what will bring well-being to the population. Happiness, on the other hand, is a more personal, individual dimension. You wouldn't want the government to decide for you what's going to make you happy. I mean, that would be kind of a dictatorship if, somebody in government, a minister in government decides the way you have to, to be happy, or what is your happiness. So you really want to have this freedom, to find your own way towards happiness, which is a very personal dimension, but that can develop in enabling condition. And the other thing that the government can do is, if we are aware that happiness really comes from a balanced development between our material needs and our psychological needs, between our physical needs and our spiritual needs, then to look at development in a much more holistic way, and to look at education in a more holistic way, so that we include in education not only developing the intellect and the knowledge, but also the emotional competencies, emotional learning, social learning. So emotional and social dimension of development of the child, elements like mindfulness and compassion, should and could easily become part of any regular school curriculum.
Could you speak about the links between mindfulness, spirituality, well-being and its application in a largely secular society?
Yes, I think that an alternative development paradigm needs values. So you cannot bring about a lasting systemic or structural change without a change in mindset, in consciousness, because systems are just the product of our minds, of what we think, the way we act, the way we relate with one another, the way we relate with nature, and so on. I mean, the systems are not God-given, or they're produced by human activity, and this human activity is a consequence of our way of our own consciousness. So any lasting systemic change has to do with this change of consciousness. Now, the question that we want to address is, how does a mindfulness approach apply in a secular society? Because most of the developed world is not really another tradition, but rather a secular world, or multi-religious or multicultural, where you cannot apply one specific religious approach. And I believe that mindfulness is not really something that is religious. It is really based on the observation that our awareness is like the most fundamental quality of consciousness. And the way we direct our awareness determines the world we live in. So the world is an infinitely complex system. And we always perceive a small part of it. And what we perceive, what we experience, depend on where we focus our awareness. But most of us are not even aware of our awareness. Our awareness is just caught by outer circumstances. And I just read this morning that advertising and marketing is spending over 600 billion a year to catch our awareness, basically. That's what marketing is about, catching our awareness. So I think a different society depends to a very large extent on our ability to reclaim our power of awareness and redirect our awareness intentionally according to values that we want to put forward, rather than some external forces like the media or marketing will decide for us. So I think that also should be absolutely part of education, to train the children to be aware of this innate capability of directing intentionally their attention, their awareness, and using it in such a way that our attention is aligned with our intentions. And that's not something religious. This is something universally human.
So you've developed a strategy for promoting happiness. Could you tell us what the most important lesson that you've learned from this?
I think the starting point is always a reflective process. So because happiness is not something that can be imparted from outside. It's sort of a moment where people reflect on what is truly important in their life. Reflect, where do they want to focus their energy? Where do they want to focus their attention? What do we really want to do? What is really meaningful in my life? And so it starts with a reflective process to really sort of go inside ourselves and look for our deepest aspirations. And my experience is that happiness, to a large extent, is connected with our ability to align what we are actually doing in our life with what are our deepest value and aspiration. So it's really a transformative process that starts with the individual and then grows in the community and ultimately in society and hopefully on the planet. And at the same time, it's a circular process, because if we can contribute to changing the systems or the structures so that they enable the condition that are favorable to the development of well-being and happiness, then of course this in turn has an effect on the individual. So we can come into a virtuous circle that self-transformation has an impact on society, and the social transformation allows for inner transformation. So it's really about creating and holding a space where this transformation is allowed to take place, where there's enough trust, security and safety, where we can open up to our vulnerability and really, go at a deeper place where we oftentimes don't dare to go, and from there change can come about.
So you've mentioned that one of the strongest indicators of well-being is community vitality, and I wondered if you have any suggestions for people or for communities of how they can apply this where they live or where they work.
But what is community vitality? Community vitality is the feeling that I have people around me that I trust, people that I love, people that trust me, people that love me. So it's a relational dimension. And we see that in recent history in the Western world, a lot of the care that was given to one another has been outsourced to professionals, like children care, the care for the elders, the care for the sick, or if we have sorrows, many of us will go and speak with a psychologist because we don't have a friend to speak to. Right? So it's, again, a process of reclaiming, what is the natural foundation of human life, which is friendship and love. Really, friendship and love is that what's make human life worth living. And it's reclaiming this and not seeing that as a commodity that we buy and sell. And this is a challenge to the GDP model, because friendship and love doesn't cost anything. Therefore, it doesn't contribute to the growing of GDP. But if we are aiming at happiness and well-being, then it becomes something extremely precious. Yeah? So it's really, how do we cultivate relationship? So many people live in an apartment building and they don't know the name of their neighbors. And if one of the neighbors is ill, I wouldn't even know it most of the time. So how do we recreate a social fabric where people who are geographically close to one another in space are also emotionally close to one another, trust in one another, speak with one another? And this implies time. Friendship is something that needs to be cultivated. It's not something, we meet, we're friends, and that's it. We can let it be. We have to, speak with one another, listen to one another, share, or something. We have to cultivate it. It's like a garden, right? It's not like once you plant a seed and then you can forget about it, it will become a tree. It will not if you don't cultivate it. And human relationship has the same nature. They need to be cultivated. But if we only do things that are GDP oriented, they will not bring income, this cultivation. So we will not have time to do it. So we have to reframe our time use in such a way that there is time for things that are really important, but are not economically important, but humanly important. So I think that's a very important dimension of community vitality.
So do you think that other countries could easily replace GDP with growth national happiness as a measure of success?
I think in the developed world, the main difference is it will be a bottom-up movement. In Bhutan, it was really the vision of a king, a wise king, sort of a little bit of a fairy tale situation. You have a wise king with a benevolent vision and then implementing it for his kingdom. And this, I believe, won't happen in this way in the West. But I think there is a growing grassroots movement, grassroots initiative, citizens' initiative, peoples. And on one hand, there is this sort of aspiration to a new beginning almost, so something new that has to emerge. And more people feel the way we have been conducting our society in the past decades doesn't really hold a future. And there are many, many signs now that show that it doesn't hold a future. Ecological crisis, economic crisis, political crisis, existential crisis. You know, depression and stress have become the number one factor of disability in the world, in the developed world. Yeah. So we see we have come to a threshold, to a crossroad, and the awareness that we need to change direction is growing. And I think there will be a tipping point in collective consciousness, right? And of course it's good if we can involve politicians or, you know, like people who have power, but in the end I don't think that it's really up to them. It's really up to a very large network of like-minded and like-hearted individuals, organizations that are almost like seeds of the future. So I feel like the current system is like a machine in a way, but this machine is slowly breaking down and we will not really fix this machine. But, you know, like sometimes you have a road and it's concrete and there's a little crack and there's a little grass coming out of the crack. So it's something of this nature. The seed of the future are already blossoming, or at least buds. And this is what we need to nourish, more than, I believe, trying to fix the machine. But the cracks are becoming bigger and bigger. Therefore, there's more and more room for these seeds of the future. And if we can network all these seeds of the future into one powerful worldwide movement, I think change is definitely going to come about. I mean, change is anyway going to come about because this system is at a dead end. The question is only whether will the change come about through suffering and catastrophes, or will the change come about through consciousness, intentional change? I think that's the real question, not whether change will come or not, but how will the change come about?
And are you optimistic for which way that will go?
Well, I'm fundamentally optimistic. You know, how can you promote happiness if you're a pessimist? I believe in happiness, and I'm quite happy really doing it.